Imagine reading this headline. Google wants permission to release millions of mosquitoes in California and Florida. Not drones, not robots, mosquitoes. And not just a few. Reports describe tens of millions of lab-reared mosquitoes potentially released over 2 years. At first, it sounds like the start of a sci-fi disaster movie. A tech giant, a government permit, and millions of insects being released into the real world. But here is the twist. These mosquitoes are male. Male mosquitoes do not bite. And the whole idea is not to create more mosquitoes. It is to release mosquitoes in order to make fewer mosquitoes. That sounds backwards, but the science behind it is actually fascinating. The plan is based on a biological trick. Release specially prepared male mosquitoes, let them mate with wild females, and cause the eggs from those matings to fail. So instead of spraying chemicals everywhere, the strategy uses mosquito romance against mosquitoes themselves. But as always, the truth is more complicated than the headline. Some reports say 32 million. The federal notice suggests the maximum could be higher if you count both states across both years. Some coverage talks broadly about disease-carrying mosquitoes, while the official EPA notice names a specific species, Culex quinquefasciatus. And behind the entire project is Alphabet's debug team, a project connected to Google's parent company, using biology, automation, and AI-powered sorting to fight one of the most dangerous animals on Earth. So today, we are going to answer the real question. Is this a smart new way to fight disease? Or the kind of idea that sounds good until millions of insects are in the air? Because reality does not need fiction. Reality has lore. Alphabet's debug project is built around a simple but strange idea. Use good bugs to fight bad bugs. In this case, the bad bugs are mosquitoes that can spread disease. And mosquitoes are not just annoying. Globally, they are connected to some of the most serious diseases humans deal with. Malaria, dengue, Zika, West Nile virus, chikungunya, yellow fever, and more. But not all mosquitoes are the same. That detail matters a lot. Aedes mosquitoes are often connected to dengue, Zika, yellow fever, and chikungunya. Culex mosquitoes are associated with diseases like West Nile virus and St. Louis encephalitis. So when a headline says Google wants to release mosquitoes, it sounds simple. But in biology, the species matters. According to the federal notice, this specific application is for live adult male Culex quinquefasciatus mosquitoes carrying a strain of Wolbachia bacteria. That is a long name, but the basic idea is easier to understand. They are male mosquitoes prepared to sabotage reproduction. Not by biting, not by poisoning, not by spreading disease, by mating.
And that brings us to the most important fact in the entire story. Only female mosquitoes bite. Female mosquitoes need blood to produce eggs. Male mosquitoes feed on nectar and plant sugars. So when people imagine millions of released mosquitoes turning into millions of bites, that is not what this program is designed to do. The plan depends on releasing males only. That is why sex sorting is one of the most important parts of the whole operation. If the technology is going to work safely, the released mosquitoes must be male, because the females are the ones that bite. At this scale, you cannot just have people manually sorting mosquitoes one by one with tweezers. You need automation, you need sensors, you need computer vision. You need extremely reliable systems that can separate fragile insects quickly and accurately. That is one of the strangest parts of this story. Google is not just dealing with software anymore. This is software touching biology. A company famous for search, maps, ads, Android, and AI is now connected to a system that breeds, sorts, counts, packages, releases, and monitors insects. The debugging is no longer inside a computer. The bug is literal. Now let's talk about the trick that makes this possible. Wolbachia. Wolbachia is a type of bacteria naturally found in many insects. It is not some alien chemical invented from scratch. The key is that certain combinations of Wolbachia and mosquitoes can create reproductive incompatibility. Here is the simple version. Scientists rear male mosquitoes that carry a specific Wolbachia strain. Those males are released into the target area. They mate with wild females, but the eggs from those matings do not hatch. So the female mosquito has spent her reproductive opportunity, but no new mosquitoes are born. Repeat that over and over, release after release, and the target mosquito population can shrink. It is population control through biological misdirection. And this is why the number sounds so huge. Millions of mosquitoes sounds terrifying until you realize that for this strategy to work, the released males need to outnumber the wild males by a lot. The released males have to be common enough that wild females are more likely to meet with them instead of normal wild males. That means this is not a one-time release where somebody opens a box and the problem disappears. It is a campaign. You measure the mosquito population, you release males, you monitor traps, you adjust the release areas. Then you do it again. That is the logic behind the scale. The plan is not release millions of mosquitoes and hope. The plan is flood the area with harmless males so more meetings produce no offspring. Still strange, but not random.
Now this is where online conversations can get messy. Some people hear this story and immediately call them genetically modified mosquitoes. But Wolbachia-based mosquito control is usually described differently. The idea is not necessarily to edit mosquito DNA, it is to use bacteria-associated reproductive incompatibility. That distinction matters because there are many kinds of mosquito control technology. Some involve genetic engineering, some involve radiation, some involve sterile insect techniques, some use Wolbachia, some try to suppress a population. Others try to replace a population with mosquitoes less capable of spreading disease. If we mix every mosquito technology into one viral headline, the story becomes scarier, but less accurate. For this Google/debug application, the official description points to male Culex quinquefasciatus mosquitoes carrying Wolbachia. And that also clears up another common confusion. A lot of Wolbachia mosquito stories involve Aedes aegypti, especially in dengue control programs. Debug has also discussed work connected to Aedes mosquitoes in other contexts, including Singapore. But this specific EPA notice for California and Florida names Culex quinquefasciatus. That may sound like a small technical correction. It is not. It changes what disease systems we are talking about, what mosquito behavior matters, and how the results should be evaluated. The broader technology may have examples from Aedes programs, but this permit request is about Culex. And if we are going to talk about science, we have to keep the species straight. So why go through all of this? Why not just spray for mosquitoes? The answer is we already do. Mosquito control districts use many tools, removing standing water, larvicides, adulticides, surveillance traps, public alerts, and personal protection. But mosquitoes are very good at surviving us. They breed in tiny amounts of standing water. They thrive in cities. They can develop resistance to insecticides. And the diseases they carry do not stay neatly in one place. Travel, climate, urbanization, and changing habitats can all affect where mosquito-borne diseases appear. So researchers are interested in new tools that can be added to mosquito control programs. Not magic bullets. Tools. Wolbachia male releases could become one more method in a larger system. Targeted, species-specific, and potentially less dependent on broad chemical spraying. That is the strongest argument for the project. But the reason this story feels different is obvious. It is Google. If a small university lab asked to release mosquitoes, people would still have questions. But when a huge tech company is involved, the questions multiply. Who controls the data? Who chooses the neighborhoods? Who monitors the results? How transparent is the program? What happens if residents do not want the releases? And if a private company develops a biological mosquito control product, who profits from it? Those are not conspiracy questions. Those are governance questions. The science can be promising and still need oversight. The mosquitoes can be male and still require verification. The project can be non-GMO and still deserve public review. That is why the regulatory process matters. The EPA is not just a background detail in this story. The permit process is the point where a futuristic idea has to become a real-world, accountable experiment. And that brings us to the question everyone is thinking. What could go wrong? The first fear is bites. But again, male mosquitoes do not bite. If the release is truly male only, the released mosquitoes are not the ones seeking blood meals. The second concern is accidental female release. That is more serious, because females do bite.
Any program like this has to prove that its sorting process is reliable, and that the number of accidental females is extremely low. This is where automation, quality control, and monitoring become critical. The third concern is whether it works. A method can work in one place and perform differently somewhere else. Mosquito populations are local. Weather, habitat, competing mosquito species, release density, and timing all matter. The fourth concern is rebound. Suppression does not always mean permanent elimination. If releases stop, mosquito populations can come back, especially if the environment still has breeding sites. The fifth concern is ecology. This method targets a specific mosquito species, not all insects, and it works through mating compatibility. That makes it more targeted than many broad approaches. But local environmental review still matters, especially when releases happen at large scale. So the balanced answer is not, this is obviously dangerous, and it is not, this is obviously perfect. The honest answer is, it is promising, but it needs strong oversight, transparent data, and careful monitoring. That is less dramatic, but it is much closer to the truth.
And there is a reason scientists keep exploring methods like this. Mosquitoes are incredibly difficult to control. They do not need a lake. They can breed in a bucket, a tire, a clogged gutter, a plant saucer, or a tiny pool of forgotten water. And by the time people notice the problem, the population may already be established. With diseases like West Nile virus, Culex mosquitoes can play an important role. The virus can circulate between birds and mosquitoes, and infected mosquitoes can then bite humans or animals. So if a targeted male release program can lower local Culex populations, it could become a useful public health tool. But could is the key word. That is what field tests are for. They are not supposed to prove a company's marketing. They are supposed to generate real-world evidence. Do the males survive long enough? Do they mate successfully? Do they reduce egg hatch? Do local mosquito numbers fall? How much release effort is needed? How long do effects last? What does monitoring show? The value of the project depends on those answers, not on how futuristic it sounds. And the scale behind this is massive. To release millions of mosquitoes, you need an entire biological supply chain. You need to rear them, you need to separate males from females, you need to count them, you need to package them, you need to move them while keeping them alive, you need to release them in the right places at the right times, you need traps to measure wild mosquito populations, you need data from before and after, and then you need to do it again. This is where the story becomes bigger than mosquitoes, because what Google's debug project represents is the engineering of living systems. A mosquito control program used to sound like trucks, fogging equipment, and chemical spray. This sounds like factories, robotics, algorithms, biological compatibility, mapping, and feedback loops. It is pest control redesigned like a technology platform, and that is why people are fascinated by it. It feels like the future, but it also feels unsettling, because the future is not happening in a screen. It is happening outdoors, in neighborhoods, in ecosystems, in places where people live. So should California and Florida approve it? The case for approval is clear. Male mosquitoes do not bite. Wolbachia-based suppression is targeted. Mosquito-borne disease is real. Chemical control has limits. And field trials are how we learn whether a tool works under local conditions. But the case for caution is also clear. Communities deserve transparency. Regulators need detailed data. The public should know where releases happen, how many mosquitoes are released, how female contamination is prevented, how success is measured, and what happens if the results are disappointing. The best position is not fear, and it is not blind trust. It is verification. Show the data. Name the species. Explain the safeguards. Report the results. Let the public comment. And do not let the viral version of the story replace the official one. Because the official story is already fascinating. A tech company connected to Google is asking regulators for permission to test male mosquitoes carrying Wolbachia bacteria in California and Florida, with the goal of reducing disease-carrying mosquito populations by causing wild females to produce eggs that do not hatch. That is not a monster movie. It is a public health experiment. But it is one of the strangest public health experiments most people will ever hear about.
And maybe that is the real lesson here. The scariest thing about mosquitoes is not the buzzing sound. It is how much power something so tiny can have. A single infected bite can start a chain of disease. A forgotten puddle can become a breeding site. An insect most people slap without thinking can shape public health policy, scientific research, and now even tech company innovation. So maybe releasing mosquitoes to fight mosquitoes is not as crazy as it first sounds. Maybe it is exactly the kind of weird solution you get when the problem is already weird. Use males that do not bite. Give them a reproductive mismatch. Release enough of them to outcompete wild males. Let mosquito biology do the rest. Elegant. Unsettling. Very 2026. And now the question moves from the lab to the public. If your city had a mosquito problem, and officials asked permission to release millions of non-biting males designed to reduce future mosquito populations, would you approve it? Or would the words Google mosquitoes be enough to make you say no? Because sometimes the future does not arrive as a flying car. Sometimes it arrives in a small container full of insects. And someone has to decide whether to open the lid.